cari amici di Vox Italia TV ad un nostro nuovo appuntamento. Dear friends on Vox Italia TV, welcome back to your channel. Today we'll be having the great pleasure of hosting the investigation journalist Joe Hoft from the United States. He is one of the most relevant figures when it comes to the Russiagate scandal and well as from the Italian involvement in the story. That is disappointingly most often hidden from the mainstream media. Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure having you with us, and thanks for accepting our invitation.
Great. Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, Joe, so let's now dive into the core of this whole story. You are one of the main experts when it comes to the Russiagate scandal. You have just published a book, In God We Trust, a book you can find on Amazon, and I suggest you all to get it so to better comprehend to the joint point of view. Joe is also the main figures behind the Gateway Pundit website that is daily viewed by the high state powers. I'd start by asking Joe what exactly in the Russiagate and how the Mueller investigation might end up behind a boomerang.
Okay. Yeah. Again. Okay. Great. Thanks again for having me. I'm excited to be here. And maybe I'll start first by just mentioning a little bit about who I am. My twin brother, my identical twin brother, Jim Hoft, started the website, The Gate, about 15 years ago in response to the lack of recognition in the media, related to, I guess, the other story, the story that was not being told, the more from a conservative. And so he's grown that website now up into, it's one of the largest websites in the U.S. Get more than 1 million viewers a day, and it's now it's one of it's just one of the biggest sites out there. And I started writing for Jim a few years ago. My background's in finance and where I was an executive in Hong Kong, and I also have an auditing background. And so as the origins of the Mueller scandal started, and the Russiagate, that's where I think my skill set was very beneficial to in my efforts to understand and to report on what was really happening behind the scenes, what the media wasn't telling us. So the main point that I would share with you today is just one, if I were to say this in just a couple sentences, is that the United States is really still going through the most the largest, the most sinister, the most corrupt period perhaps in its existence. And this what happened, and what's not clearly reported in our media, in most of the mainstream media, is that there was an attempted coup d'etat of President Trump and his administration, and that this effort started at least back into 2015, late 2015, and it was the people that were behind it was the Obama administration and some of his higher ups in the administration, as well as the Hillary Clinton campaign. And the point that's really relevant today in our discussion is that now there's evidence that this entire coup d'etat of the United States, this massive scandal, has its origins in Italy. What early on there was an effort to brand Donald Trump as some sort of individual who was had connections to Russia and also was benefiting from Russia's efforts in the election, and we found this was the case. As a matter of fact, it goes back to even 2015. There were individuals that were spying on and attempting not just to spy, but to set up members of the Trump administration, or before the election, members of his campaign, or even remotely connected to his campaign, these efforts to create this, to set these people up as so that they might fall into some sort of legal trap. And there were various targets, but one of them was General Mike Flynn, and he was an individual that worked for the Obama administration, but had a fallout with Obama when he disagreed with Obama's Middle East policy. And General Flynn then started working for the Trump administration, for the Trump campaign. He would speak at Trump events. And so Obama targeted General Flynn directly. Recently, in the last couple weeks, General Flynn's attorney made this statement. She said the reason Obama targeted General Flynn was because he was going to do an audit of the intel community, and that audit was going to uncover billions of dollars that was managed by the administration, the Obama administration, outside the books. So it was, which was illegal and is illegal, and that means money was used and pushed off to the side, billions apparently, and used illegally by the administration. Apparently, General Flynn knew that. They've done all they can to shut down General Flynn since the day, since the inauguration when President Trump was elected president, and before, since early 2015. We know that General Flynn, for example, was at a dinner or a meeting where two individuals were there, and this was in late 2015. And one of those individuals is connected to Italy, and his name's Joseph Mifsud. And so you'll see Italy's connected to this very early on. And there's others besides Joseph Mifsud that we can talk about here.
Is the initial Mifsud involvement with this story when he first met the general thing?
Well, that's correct, and it shows that not only was General Flynn targeted, but George Papadopoulos was targeted, and both of those individuals have connections. They both have connections to Italy.
We are now seeing a lovely picture published from the Gateway Pundit framing Obama and Renzi. What's the role of the ex-Prime Minister Renzi in this story?
At the same time as these efforts were taking place in London and Rome and in the United States to align the Trump campaign with Russia, President Obama was meeting with President Renzi. And we have evidence that they met at least in 2016. As a matter of fact, the last person that Obama had at the White House in an official state dinner was the Prime Minister from Italy, Renzi. And then there's a number of individuals that were at a luncheon with Renzi that were all connected to this scandal and this effort to tie Trump to Russia. Individuals like Joe Biden, for example, and individuals from Italy as well. And so we also know that Obama met with Renzi a few months after the Trump inauguration, and he was there supposedly in Italy on a climate change event, but there's suspicions that perhaps there was something that they needed to talk about in person related to the Russiagate that never made the news. But that's all suspicions at this point. Now, what we know is that the attempted coup d'etat of President Trump, as he was being inaugurated, the media was given information and reported on it daily, these various stories about connections between Trump and Russia and the various members of his team in Russia. And that all culminated with the Mueller investigation, which originated in the spring of 2017. And this investigation was set up to investigate any relationship between President Trump and Russia, especially any type of collusion related to between the two parties. Now, the law in the U.S. states that to set up a special counsel, which Mueller was, you have to have a crime, and it has to be associated with a actual legal issue noted in the statutory code, and there was nothing that was listed when they created the Mueller special counsel that there was no crime that was listed. It was, we're just going to check into the collusion between Trump and Russia. So there was some people at the very beginning saying, hey, this doesn't make sense. You can't just set up a special counsel and not base it on a crime. And then the other thing that was done when they set it up was the fact that in order to perform a special counsel, you have to keep the scope of the special counsel to a very specific. And when they set up the Mueller special counsel, they said, we want you to check into the Russia collusion with Trump, but also anything else that you can find. And so some people, some scholars at the very beginning said this is unconstitutional. Yeah, and the other point is that at the time they set up the Mueller investigation, we now have evidence that the people that set that up and the members of the Mueller team, they all knew that this was, they all knew it was a lie, and yet they moved forward. Yep, because we know that General Flynn had been exonerated from any crimes in a memo back in January of 2017, and yet they hid that from everyone, including General Flynn, up until recently that information was obtained. So that's what we know. This thing started off, and it was illegal, and it was based on a fraud. So what we know now, also in more recent months, there were testimonies that were given in front of the U.S. House of Representatives, and these testimonies were kept behind locked doors up until a couple months ago. And when those testimonies were released, we find out that Joseph Mifsud, this character who I mentioned very early on that was associated with General Flynn, and then George Papadopoulos, this Joseph Mifsud had connections to the Hillary Clinton campaign. And we also know now that Hillary Clinton was behind this fake document that was created by an individual named Christopher Steele from the UK. And I'll mention Christopher Steele here for one moment. Christopher Steele was hired by the Hillary Clinton campaign. We found this out a week ago. And there was a court case in the UK where Christopher Steele he lost the case. He has to pay a couple bankers from Russia that he associated with the Trump campaign in his memos, where he was trying to set up Trump with Russia. Just last week, the courts announced that Steele is going to have to pay these Russians a hefty penalty for lying about them, and also he's going to have to pay their legal fees. And this happened in the UK. Well, Steele, so there were different streams of methods that they were trying to set up Trump. One was using this document from Christopher Steele, which was a total fabrication. Now we know this. It was a total lie, and we found out about this from a report from an audit by an individual named Horowitz, who's the auditor in the U.S. of the Justice Department. And he had a report where he noted this entire Steele dossier and their efforts to use this to spy on President Trump was fraudulent. It was based on a fraud. The whole thing was made up by Christopher Steele. So we know that, and that was one method that they were trying to attack Trump and gain evidence on Trump. Another effort that we know of is that Joseph Mifsud, who we know has connections to Italy Intel, some people have questioned, who was he working for? Was he working for the UK? Was he working for Italy? Others have even suggested Saudi Arabia. But Joseph Mifsud came into the picture, and he was running an entity in the UK. And he was pro-Hillary, and he was also against Brexit. And this individual aligned himself with George Papadopoulos. And Papadopoulos went and actually met this guy, maybe even worked for him, did a paper for him. And Papadopoulos was introduced to Mifsud. And Mifsud supposedly, in one of their communications, one of their meetings, Mifsud said to Papadopoulos, apparently, it's reported that he shared that the Russians had Hillary's emails. And that is what started the entire Russiagate scandal. The FBI was pinned into a corner and said, when did you start your investigation of these individuals in the Trump campaign? And they've stated that they started this work in July of 2016. So this was about 5 months before the election. And it was based on the communication between Mifsud and George Papadopoulos. When the individuals that had met Papadopoulos found out that Papadopoulos was working for the Trump campaign, they targeted him. And it's believed that Mifsud shared this information with Papadopoulos, and then later another individual came into Papadopoulos' life, and it was an ambassador from Australia, and he reportedly had a meeting with Papadopoulos, and then he shared from this meeting that Papadopoulos had shared that Russia had Hillary's emails. And this is what the FBI says. This is the reason they started their investigation into the Trump campaign. A discussion, a rumored discussion between two individuals that was shared with the FBI via another individual who shared it with another individual who eventually shared it with the FBI. And that is what started the entire investigation by the FBI into the Trump administration.
Meanwhile, in Italy, we are wondering where Mifsud is. Would you believe him to be still alive?
Well, this is a good question. So, because after Mifsud met with Papadopoulos, he seemed to fall off the face of the earth. Nobody had really seen him until we know that in like early 2000, early or mid 2017. Mifsud was in the United States, and he he was at some presentations at some convention, and then he at that point he was interviewed by either the FBI or the Mueller team on his connections to Russia. And apparently he lied to the FBI at least 3 times, but they never charged him, they never followed him, and they never made an effort to even find him. He was allowed to leave the United States, and then his whereabouts he became missing. And so for a year.
So where is Mifsud?
And now, so there was even rumors coming out of Italy that he had died, that he was, there was rumors that he was hidden for a while. His passport showed up in, I believe, in Portugal. So there was, people were starting to think that this man was dead. But we have an individual that helps us, that uses AI to search the world for individuals like Joseph Mifsud. And he located Mifsud in Italy And he was even able to find pictures of him, and at the time, well, ironically, or I guess maybe not, Mifsud, the pictures he was able to provide us were pictures with Mifsud and a couple prostitutes. So
So you are saying Mifsud is covered by the Italian Secret Service.
that's right.
However, the last September, Bar Durham and CIA chief Gina Haspel come to Italy. Apparently, they can't get the result they were expecting to write.
Okay, I think so. So what happened over the past year is after the Mueller case was finally brought to an end, and it didn't come to an end until Attorney General William Barr took office and replaced Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions had allowed all of this to happen and recused himself from all of it. Trump fired him after the day after the last elections. And so he fired Sessions and brought in an Attorney General, Bill Barr. Bill Barr ended up immediately meeting with Mueller. He asked them what they had on President Trump as far as Russia collusion. They had nothing. The big question we still have is, when did they know that there was nothing there? We know that there's evidence now that they knew back in January, 4 or 5 months before the Mueller investigation even started, that there was nothing there. But then he asked Mueller to put together a report, and Mueller did. And in that report, they reported that there was no Russia collusion, but they tried to make attempts to tie Trump to obstructing the investigation. And that's the claims from the Obama and Hillary team. And other individuals have said all along that the entire Mueller investigation wasn't about Russia. Their real efforts were to catch President Trump in an obstruction trap, to have him attempt to stop the Mueller investigation, whereby they could then use that against him in the court and say he was trying to obstruct this case, kill this case illegally. Well, Trump sat back and did not do that, and so they couldn't even catch him on obstruction. So after that entire episode and the reports were finished, Bill Barr then started looking into this, and he assigned a U.S. Attorney by the name of John Durham to investigate what started this thing and then what happened during this whole time. What we've found since then and even before then is there's a couple other streams that were occurring, not just Mifsud with Papadopoulos. There was also Mifsud with General Flynn, but there was also an individual named Ochenero from Italy, and he and his sister were indicted in early January of 2017. And the Italians claimed that the Ocheneros were putting malware and spying on a number of individuals in Italy and doing this illegally. And Ochenero and his sister both claimed that this was a lie. They felt like this did not happen and they did not commit these crimes.
One more thing, is the Conte government working with Durham and Barr to uncover the Italians accountable for the Russiagate?
So one thing that was brought to our attention was either in, I believe in 2018, there were 4 individuals that Conte that had been, I guess, fired, that appeared to be possibly related to this whole Ochenero case. So what can I say about that? That's kind of what brought me into this whole discussion with Ochenero. So Ochenero claims he was used by the deep state, by these individuals that were trying to set up Trump, and that they took his computers, and he had 2 entities in the U.S., that some spies from Italy traveled to the U.S. and attempted to put some of Hillary's emails on his servers in 2 locations in the U.S. And he claims that this was an effort then that they were going to try to tie Trump to Russia and Hillary's emails, because they would find these emails on Ochenero's servers, and they might also find them in the perhaps even in the White House, and those emails then would be used to what they attempted to do is put these viruses or malware or these emails from Hillary on Oceanero's computers. He believes we do have evidence to support some of Oceanero's claims. One evidence, some evidence that we have is that he was there were these couple of these investigators. There is evidence that they traveled to the U.S. and they traveled to the two locations where Oceanero has business. One is in the state of Washington. One is in the state of West Virginia. We have evidence that.
Who are those public Italian figures that risk to be cut up because of the Durham investigation?
So Italian figures, you mean? So well, there's suspicions about Renzi because of his closeness with Obama. There's suspicions about Conti because these individuals that were let go in the intelligence community, that occurred under Conti. There's suspicions about some other, perhaps some magistrates and names I can't remember, also involved. And there's also there's this entity in Italy, and the name of it is Link University, and that's where Mifsud had ties, and that's where Papadopoulos was taken when he is it called Link University in Rome. But anyways, that's where Papadopoulos was sent when he was communicating with Mifsud, and maybe where he first, maybe even I'm not sure if that's where he first met Mifsud, but he met some people there.
So beyond magistrates, would you say that also the Italian Secret Service are involved in this whole story?
I know that Oceanero has mentioned some individuals. There's one individual. I don't have the picture in front of me, but there's one individual that's been a long time who was given an award by Robert Mueller, and I can't recall his name right now.
One last question for you, Joe. When do you think Durham will unlive his secrets? Someone says that in September this case will explode. What would you say?
Well, I hope so. I mean, Americans are so frustrated. No matter what you're seeing in the media, behind the scenes, there's this massive population of the country, at least half, that's been following this, that is livid that nothing's happened to date. So Americans want to see action, are livid with what's happened, and would like to see action as soon as possible. There was some information last weekend saying that Durham may wait now until after the election, so he's not accused of damaging the election or interfering with the election, but we don't know. There's a lot of people that feel like this information needs to come out as soon as they have it. As a matter of fact, there are a number of people like myself that believe there is enough information in the public realm already to indict individuals in the Obama administration. People like James Comey, who lied in front of the FBI, James Clapper, who lied in front of the FBI. The one individual they believe behind maybe all of this is John Brennan, who was the head of the CIA under Obama. All these individuals have been involved with it. Brennan, Comey, and Clapper have all lied in front of Congress, which is a crime, which is what they charged Roger Stone with. But he's the only one that gets charged and brought to court. These other individuals have walked free since then. The individuals on the Mueller team that were involved in the investigation, there's one key individual that's been aligned to Mueller for a very long time. His name's Weissman. He and Mueller were involved in the Enron case in the early 2000s. They were responsible for 85,000 people from Arthur Andersen accounting firm losing their jobs. He then was the individual that really people believe was the real coordinator in the Mueller investigation, and he's still walking free. As a matter of fact, yesterday he was on TV saying, we need to bring Roger Stone in front of a New York court.
Joe, it's been a great pleasure having you with us today. I hope we'll meet again.
Yep, there's a lot more to this whole story. Yep. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Have a next week so to dive further into this story that for sure doesn't end at this point.
That'd be great. Okay. Yep. No, it's great. It's an incredible story, and Italy's a big part of it. So thank you, guys.
Well, dear Vox Italia TV friend, today we offered you a great scoop. We listened to one of the most relevant individuals and as well as one of the most prepared person in regard to the Russiagate scandal. That is still most often obscured and hidden from the Italian mainstream channels. We won't let this go, and we will continue to keep you posted in a story that will eventually overthrow the geopolitical balance not only in the United States but also all over the West world, starting from Italy.